to have fun? Are you ready to have fun for real?
Atlassian is a company that provides collaboration products to software companies. Atlassian has generated $1.6 billion in export sales.
Like fun and games, keep playing them. I'm just saying, think back then we was like one and the same, on the right track, but I was on the wrong train.
Pretty cool.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks. Where am I sitting?
Right here.
Oh, right here.
Sit down at the. We're down at the pub.
bar.
Have a seat. Well, cool. We're pretty lucky to have you. Right? What, about 4 weeks after the IPO, or 5 weeks, or?
Yeah,
It's all a blur?
About that.
About that?
Yeah, about that, mid-December.
So good. So, about a million things I want to talk about
Is
Atlassian.
coffee spiked or not spiked?
What's that?
Is this coffee spiked or not spiked?
What did you order? We've got it all.
Not spiked.
Not spiked. So, a lot of, I only want to talk a little bit about the IPO, but I do want to talk about time in the journey a little bit. So,
Sure.
Atlassian was what, 14 years to IPO?
13.
13 years, right? And I think the co-founders had been working on a prior gig together even before that, right? So maybe 13 plus years to IPO.
No, Atlassian was the first company they started
first company
together.
started, so
yeah,
13
just
years.
out of college.
So we see a lot, go public early, hurry up, unicorn rounds are silly. It's certainly interesting the last couple of days. High level question, does it matter?
It could. I mean,
Yeah.
I think like every company is going to be unique and individual. For us, we've been a company that's been bootstrapped entirely from the very beginning.
Yes.
And, I think we took our time. We probably could have gone public. I mean, certainly, we had 10 straight years of profitability.
Yes.
And 10 straight years of decent growth. So I think we had the profile of a company that could have gone public 2 or 3 or 4 years earlier. But we took our time. Part of it for us was getting into the rhythm of operating as a public company for a series of years. And so we would practice, for 2 years prior to going public, we practiced doing quarterly earnings calls, and we practiced.
You did actually do quarterly
Oh
earnings.
yeah, practice
Just
running.
you in Excel, or who was on the call?
Yeah, it's sometimes with the board, sometimes just internally.
Yeah.
But I think understanding, trying to understand what it's like, what it will be like as a public company, and getting into the rhythm of acting like that,
Yes.
Was part of the maturity or maturation and growing up that we felt we wanted to do. And I think there's a lot of companies that don't do that, and they figured it out afterwards. And I think for some of them that's not okay. For some of them it is okay. For us, we felt like we wanted to take our time, and it's kind of a measure twice, cut once strategy.
Yeah. And so Atlassian had the luck. It could have IPO'd early if you wanted. Anyone can have a great IPO even when you hit 100 million in revenues. The big round you did was secondary, so you clearly didn't need the money, right?
Right.
So what did you, just because there's so much, it's so confusing to hear the noise about Uber should IPO, what does Atlassian get out of the IPO? I mean, you get a currency for M&A, but let's put that aside. It's easier to buy a company.
Yeah.
But apart from that, what have you gotten out of that? The employees got liquidity. Right, so there was some liquidity already.
That's certainly one thing. Employees get liquidity. There's other ways for employees to get liquidity, but even if you're taking kind of secondary rounds from private investors, eventually you're setting a fuse that at some point, whether you're Atlassian or Uber, you're probably going to take the public market stage.
Eventually,
you're just
you have to,
eventually leapfrogging, private secondary after private secondary. So, you're getting employees liquidity, and that was certainly important to us. We had employees that had been with the company for over a decade. In fact, we took all of the 10-year employees to New York to celebrate the IPO, and there was a big gaggle of them. And so there's a bunch of people that have worked really hard along that journey. That's one. Certainly it's a branding event for any company that takes the public stage. It was an important one for us, and so, we're really proud of the customer franchise we've built, but, we've barely scratched the surface. And so I think there's a lot of companies around the globe that haven't yet heard of Atlassian, haven't heard of our products, and this is an amplifier for that.
Yeah.
I believe, and we believe that the best.
Now, is that true? I know it's true because you said it, but that's interesting. So even today, for your target customers, you feel like brand awareness isn't in the 90s or at some level?
Well, remember, like we're always evolving our target customer
You are,
base.
yeah.
And so, we started at a very early age just targeting developers and software and technical teams, and then expanding into IT, and also now expanding into every business team inside of a company. And so I think that, the amplification of brand is going to help us kind of attack that bigger opportunity.
Yes.
So that's the second thing. I think
Yeah.
the third thing is, we believe that the best run companies are public companies, and so I think operating as a public company applies some pressure, but also I think some discipline to how you run your business.
Yes.
And we've always believed from very early on the founders, basically said we want to build. We want Atlassian to outlive us, which is kind of a hard thing for a founder to think about from day one. Like, we want Atlassian to be an indelible 50-year company, right? So we might not be selling Jira or Confluence or HipChat 50 years from now, but we want Atlassian to be building and selling something. That's sort of their goal.
Yeah.
And so I think if you think about that journey, taking the public stage, it's hard to imagine 50-year indelible companies that haven't taken the public stage. And so I do think it helps kind of with operational discipline and help build better companies over the long run.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the kind of package of reasons. And also for us, it's not, a lot of people confuse an IPO with sort of a terminus event, like it's the destination. If you're building a 50-year company, it's just a mile marker. It's not like people at Google today are talking about the IPO. It's not like people at Microsoft are talking about when Microsoft went public in 1986.
Yeah.
Right. It's just Microsoft and Google and Facebook now are very big companies that focus on growth and the 10 or 15 or 20 years in front of them.
Yeah. So
And I should say, by the way, that raising money is another really important, kind of the fourth important reason. Atlassian had been bootstrapped from the very beginning, had never raised institutional capital on its balance sheet. So we did two secondary rounds. One with Excel in 2010, and one with T. Rowe Price in 2013. And for us, like, those were really intentional decisions, right? In part, it was about secondary liquidity for employees and founders that had worked for a long time. But it was also, we had until 2010, the board was effectively just the two founders.
Yeah.
So we had
Those
kind of
quiet board meetings.
Yeah, we had really no kind of outside, advisors that were active and involved in thinking about kind of growth and hurdles.
And let's chat about that just a little minute, because
Sure.
that's not an uncommon scenario, because we have a lot of bootstrap folks here that got to a couple million in revenue. So is that and I've learned a lot in the companies that I've post-founder I've invested in. What do you think about having no one on the board, no one to outside and challenge you, right?
I think it's important to have outside perspective.
Yeah.
And for us, it was we'd just gone through 2008, 2009, so global financial crisis.
Those were challenging times.
And we were at kind of a phase of growth where I think we'd had kind of a bunch of advisors, sort of informal advisors that I think had provided input or guidance to the company over time, but not kind of really a formal, somebody that was really thinking about kind of the phases of growth that we were either going to bump into or leap over. And so that was, Excel and sort of the secondary round that we did in 2010 kind of gave us that. Rich Wong sat on the board, super incredible guy,
yeah,
and I
great.
think provided a lot of great advice and guidance. Also opened up some networking channels that might have been difficult for us to open up at the time in terms of people we wanted to hire and add to the board. Also became kind of a branding opportunity in 2010. It was, Atlassian had been this company that had flown under the radar for a long time, and the $60 million round in 2010, even though it was secondary and didn't hit the company's balance sheet, it was the single largest venture capital round that Excel had done.
It caught my attention.
At the time, right? So
it
it
caught
was
my
like,
attention, yeah.
It was like, wow, here's a company that people hadn't heard of, and why is all this capital going to even at the time just founders? Why is it going to the company? In 2013, the other secondary round we did was with T. Rowe Price, and that was intentional because what we wanted was, again, this is part of the kind of measure twice, cut once approach. We wanted to understand how big institutional investors thought about the business. And so what we wanted with T. Rowe Price, even though that round, it was like 130 went all to employees, again, didn't go to the company, what we got in exchange for that was a deeply experienced institutional firm that we could spend time with and understand the questions that they asked, how they thought about our business, and what that would look like, because we were about to take the public stage and by several orders of magnitude, add a whole bunch of other institutional investors that would think about the business the same way.
That's cool. So I want to talk about a topic that you've talked about ad nauseum, but I want to take a sort of an approach that's focused on the founders, which is sales-free models. And you have a fascinating background, if people don't know it, because you have an enterprise sales background.
Yeah.
So for real, right? I think you've carried a bag, or you've come close to it, right?
I did. Started in enterprise software carrying a bag.
Yeah, carrying a bag.
The first 7 years of my career was hard slog in enterprise sales.
Yeah, and so I want to just hone in on a couple things on it specifically. So, look, everyone in the world, no matter, and I love sales, and you have a passion for it. We'd all love to not have a sales team, if for no other reason than cost and overhead management, right? It's alluring, the idea of having this. But I want to dig in on a couple things. First of all, to be clear, it's not a human-free business, right? We have a lot of happiness officers. We do have a lot of folks at Atlassian engaging with customers.
Sure, absolutely.
Right? A lot of folks, right? And it's hundreds of folks. Or,
Sure.
yeah,
And we have a channel, which we'll get to in a second.
and we have a channel as well, right?
Yeah.
And in their own way, they're selling hard, the channel. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. How does that, and I know you thought a lot about this. In my experience, as the deal size goes up, you're leaving money on the table, which may be okay, right? Because it may be a trade-off, because Atlassian was minting cash, and many peers are not. But is that clear to you? Because I forget, you have, I don't know how many customers in the S1 that are over 50K ACV, but it's a lot. I think it was close to 1,000.
Close to 1,000.
Right? 50K customers don't mind being sold to, even if they're IT or product-centric or dev-centric, right?
Yeah.
They don't mind being sold to, I think.
Correct.
So for folks here, what's the trade-off? What are your Zen learning? Obviously, Atlassian's a huge success, but what's your advice to folks?
Well, first of all, it may be possible, may be probable in our business that you're achieving the same lifetime value of a customer over a longer period of time, right? So people always say to me, don't you think if you spend a bunch of time in a particular account that you could pull a lot of that revenue forward?
Yes.
And I do believe that's true. But oftentimes, when you do that, you create worse long-term value for your company, better short-term value because you're pulling all that revenue forward. So even in the case where we're trying to get to $1 million in kind of annual customer spend, we do that over a period of years at far more efficient, less upfront cost. So the other thing is that when you think about the recipe for our business model, it's not as simple as don't have traditional quota-carrying sales reps. It's not that simple at all. When we think about kind of our model, first of all, we started with size of the market. So for us, the market's huge. We're not targeting the Fortune 500, we're targeting the Fortune 500,000. We want to sell our software to every single company on the planet.
Yep.
If we were targeting the Fortune 500,000, we would have a completely different model, right? We'd be Workday.
Yeah.
Also, the nature of how we enter inside of our organization is different. Companies that buy our software, when you buy Workday as an example, you're only going to buy one of them. You're not going to have kind of multiple HR management systems. You're not going to have multiple general ledgers. You buy one, right? So that is a very explicit top-down sale. I'm going to talk to executives in the company, and there's a whole business case around the one thing that we're going to have. We sell team software. So first of all, we enter inside of the team, and you could have lots of teams that use different technologies, right? And that's okay too. We want to cement that one valuable landing spot and then expand over time. And so top down, is really hard to do that way. So first, pick a market, it's huge, and then build the product to reach that market. So for us, we focused a lot on building a product that teams or customers could get started in minutes. Yeah. And we priced it for affordability. So we thought, okay, if it's a really big, expensive cost, we're going to have to explain why it's expensive, right? And so you remove friction with price, and you create still future opportunity that you can capture over time. So we want the ability to expand either with additional usage in seats, or we want the ability to expand with additional products that we could sell the customer in the future. Yeah. And then the fourth point, and this is all a careful chemistry, the fourth point is you have to remove as much friction as possible from the customer's path. And this is, I think, what's really hard in a traditional sales model. For us, removing friction meant publish your price. Publish every single price. Don't have a contact us to figure out how much it is, because that is a friction point. So publish every single price. Let the customer try it, kind of on their own terms, without needing to engage us to figure out what they're trying to do with it. Invest as much as you can in the product to make sure that trial experience converts without a lot of hand-holding. And create, as you mentioned, we've got a number of people inside of the business that are focused on, we call them product and customer advocates, that are focused on helping answer questions the customer has. And so we say to every single customer, if you need extra TLC, let us know, right? We'll bend over backwards to help you. The difference is that in our model, we identify that as a kind of a bug in the model, right? It's something that we need to fix in the future. We don't want every single customer, if we're targeting 500,000, to have to raise their hand and for us to engage. We want to figure out, like, what was the problem that the customer needed human help solving, and how do we solve it for the next 999,000 customers in the future? And, it's been 13 years where we're consistently improving, refining, experimenting. And, I've said this before, we do a lot of experimentation with sort of traditional approaches. What happens when we pick up the phone and call every customer and really try to sell hard, really try to pull all that value forward? And you can do it. The challenge is does the cost scale? And I think when you look at a lot of SaaS companies, that's where they get into some challenges, where your sales and marketing expenses are way out of band with your top-line growth.
Yes.
And the trade-off, remember, in most businesses is something has to give for you to make money as a business. You either give on sales and marketing costs, you either make more money on top line, or you give on other functions of the business, like R&D. Yeah. And it always seems strange to me that for a SaaS company, for a software company building product, that your sales and marketing costs would be twice what your R&D costs would be. And I think if you look at a lot of companies, they have, at least from our perspective, they have it inverted, right? We spend twice on R&D, that we do in sales and marketing.
So that is amazing.
Sorry, there's a long
But let me dig into that a little bit for the founders here, right? So once we all get to $1 million or $2 million revenue, we figure this out. Oh my gosh, sales and marketing, even if it's accretive, right? It should be accretive if it's done right.
Sure.
But it's expensive and it's hard. So I feel like Atlassian is the new base camp, and let me explain what I mean by that for founders. So a couple years ago, before you raised the 60 million or whatever, when I used Bitbucket, but I didn't even know that it was an Atlassian product, right? All founders would talk about, I want to be like Basecamp. I want to just be on my own and build cool software, and I don't need salespeople. And now everyone wants to do the Atlassian. Now we get it. Now that Atlassian's huge, right? So we all want that, but when you meet with founders, where do you advise them that, hey, we can't all do this, right? Salesforce is a success. Workday is an extreme because we're all doing 8-figure and up deals.
Yeah.
But when you meet with founders, where do you tell them, hey, slow down? Like, even if you're doing a developer-centric product, don't copy our model, right? What's your advice to folks here?
Part of it is just the ingredients that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Like, think about your market. If I'm ServiceNow and I'm which is a great company, right?
Company, yeah.
And really only trying to sell a massive piece of software for a massive project to 2,000 companies.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we have an equivalent product that we're trying to sell to 200,000 companies, right? And so the strategies that both of those companies employ are vastly different, right? Like, we'll, in any given period, we'll probably, have as many service desk customers as it was kind of a new
next
vehicle.
Generation of the web was brand new,
Right.
And
So AdWords was was effectively a new approach to kind of reach people that were looking for something that you had, and so they really instrumented that effectively. But the first handful of prospects we spent a lot of time with in 2002, but they were focused, I think, because they were engineers, they were focused on doing what I mentioned earlier, constantly trying to improve. Say, well, like, why are we engaging? What questions are we answering?
Yeah.
How do we answer that to begin with? And this is where I tell founders, think about that. Like, once you hire your first salesperson, is all of the energy, the emphasis going to be on scaling the human approach, or figuring out how to take what you can from that human approach, because it might still scale to a certain point. But if your market is 500,000 people, 500,000 companies, or 100,000 companies, or 2,000 companies, is that the most efficient, best approach to sort of reach them?
Yeah.
And everything needs to be calibrated, right? Market, pricing, products. Like, it's not as simple as traditional salespeople or no traditional salespeople. It's a lot more complicated. And then the last thing I'd mention is, we have a channel. Like, we chose really early on that where there were opportunities that needed more human touch, how could we do that the most efficiently? And so, like, in some ways, we ripped the Microsoft playbook of, the 80s and 90s, which is like, we hired, there's a firm, Service Rocket, in Australia that I think has been a partner of ours for over a decade, and serviced in New Zealand. There were partners in France and Germany. And so, like, we didn't speak French, we didn't speak German, but we had people that did.
Yep.
And if you think about it, like, our sales force, we've got 2,000 salespeople that are out in the field. They're not employed by us, but they effectively do the same job.
They're salespeople, yeah. So I'd love to talk more about, but I want to talk about a related point. I remember, I tried to Google this, I couldn't find it, but I remember a few years ago, someone on the senior team said one of the most important things that Atlassian ever did was have more than one product, right? And I haven't
Yeah.
looked what the revenue mix was in the IPO, but you've got at least 3 of the 4 that are material, right?
Yep.
That are over 10% of your revenue, I think.
Correct.
So boy, as a founder, that's intimidating, right? How do you, especially for the management team, how do you focus on 4 products? You can't put 100% of your time. I mean, it's a myth. You have to force rank things.
Yeah.
And isn't number 4 going to fail as the competitors get more aggressive? And how do you juggle 4 even without the sales team, which helps a little bit because this way you don't need 4 sales teams,
Yeah.
right? But isn't it a challenge as well as an opportunity?
Totally is. So I think.
And what's the advice, right? What's
Hind-
the advice to
you know,
folks?
hindsight being 2020. It's easy to look back and say that was a great decision.
Yeah.
You know, the founders will say, you know, they started Atlassian with Jira in 2002. Confluence, which is the next biggest product, they shipped in 2004.
Yep.
And they did it really to scratch their own itch, right? So at the time, you know, they were using a bunch of open source wikis, and they didn't like them, and they thought, well, we could build one better. And
Yep.
it probably, I think at the time, there was a debate between, you know, the 2 founders around, man, shouldn't we really just be doubling down on this? This is a huge opportunity. And I think in hindsight, it was exactly the right decision to say, let's sort of divert engineering focus a little bit, build a second product, right? Identify, you know, like discover whether or not we have product market fit for this thing, which they did, and then kind of double down on 2 products. Had we not done that, Atlassian would be a vastly different company, right? You know, Atlassian, Jira is a great product. It's a big product, but it is not, you know, I think Atlassian is a much bigger company as a result of expanding product strategy. So that's sort of the first part. And again, that isn't going to work.
Challenge me a little bit. Imagine, but Jira is a big, and I don't want to get anything that hasn't been disclosed. Were the revenue breakdowns, are they published publicly or not?
No.
But Jira is a big platform, right?
Yeah.
So what if, just hypothetically, you'd done nothing but Jira? Jira wouldn't be even better? Wouldn't it be even more robust?
Yeah,
I mean, it has high market share, but wouldn't it even have more market share? You don't think so?
It's a hard hypothetical. You know, it's a hard hypothetical debate to have. I mean, I think like the other part of the question that you asked that I was going to answer is like for us it really hinged around product strategy. Like we think about the team. Yeah. And so for us, you know, every team, irrespective of whether they're building software or selling or marketing, needs a place to kind of organize what they're doing together as a group. They need a place to discuss it, which is what HipChat does. Yeah. They need a place to create and share content, which is Confluence. And so that sort of triumvirate, I think of that as the 3 legs of kind of a team collaboration stool. And so like we've really focused on kind of building out all 3 legs. And I think we're less of a company if we only have 1 or 2 legs.
Yeah, and I should know this, but I don't. How much organic or inorganic cross-sell do you get across the suite?
A lot.
A lot. And how does that happen? Like, describe, how does that happen? Because we all like to think that cross-departmental or cross-product expansion happens, but in my experience, usually the HR department does not go to the VP of sales and tell them to go try this product they love, right? And different products are same as different departments, but you might have a CTO that loves HipChat, but they didn't use Jira at their last company, and they don't want to learn Jira, right? Yeah. And so how does that happen?
So for us, a couple of ways. One, there's natural network effects built into our software because, you know, we're team-oriented, right? And so, and remember, even if you're in marketing, you're not part of just a marketing team. You're part of a whole bunch of different projects around your organization where you get exposed to what we do. Yeah. When you do and you like it, you pivot around to the other teams you're working with, and you say, man, what they're doing over there that I was a part of, I really like, let's start using that. That's how we get into HR. Yeah. So we don't necessarily have to land inside of HR. We can expand because someone in HR gets exposed to Jira, Confluence, and HipChat and says, man, the rest of us have to be doing what they're doing. So there's kind of a natural, organic word-of-mouth expansion that exists. Yeah. We try to aid that with some things that all of us do, right? Like email. We try to say, like, hey, did you know you who are our they are? So like end user NPS is probably the important leading indicator of future growth. Like if your end users aren't happy, you know, even if I'm a Workday user and if I'm not happy, long term that's not a great thing for Workday, even if the HR person loves them. So we sort of think about it that way. And then we've put a bunch of hooks in product to kind of point people to other things that they could do or use or trial. And if you think about it we've got 54,000 active customers now, that is the best way to canvas that opportunity and to expand it. It wouldn't necessarily be to pinpoint one after another. And so back to R&D, like we invest a lot in trying to figure out what is the most efficient vehicle for us to expand the fastest, the biggest audience.
Yeah.
And everything we do is about that.
Yeah. And then just one last question on this. I'd love to spend forever on it, but I want to hit a couple. But for the core 4 products and on the management team, when you're thinking about products strategically, how much time do you spend on each? How do you divide up? There's only so many hours in the day, right? And so how do you think about force ranking your time and effort? Is it just based on revenue, or how do you do it? Do you have do you have GMs? I'm sure you have GMs for each product, right?
We do, and it's based on kind of a combination of market opportunity and market strategy, competitive strategy.
Yeah.
Like the priorities are going to shift around depending on kind of the given market or product or priority.
I got you.
We do focus on making sure, like the thing for us now, and I mean this is probably true when we were a lot smaller too. Like you think about the quantum that a product's going to contribute, and the size that can grow over time. So like in our model, we often talked about early on that sort of use this the metaphor of a snowball rolling down the hill.
Yeah.
And so if you think about it, every new product is sort of a new snowball. And what we try to do is like you either launch more snowballs, so like they start rolling down, or you take the overall slope, which is like the investment that we would make in kind of automation or end user engagement or kind of smart recommendation strategies in product, and that steepens the slope. Right? And so the steeper the slope, the more any individual ball, if we know that it's going to get all the way down to the bottom of the hill, it's got a big market, the more snow it accumulates. And so, we're not going to drop balls at the top of the hill that we don't think are going to turn into big snowballs.
Yeah.
And then at the bottom we can build snowmen. I don't know, it's butchered them.
No, it's a good one. One other thing on complexity I want to make sure before we run out of time. So Atlassian's interesting because it has multiple products. It's also interesting to me that you have multiple ways that you sell that software. You have on-prem, you have services, you have channel, you have hosted SaaS, right? You have about every box at the moment that you could check on the panoply of ways to deliver software directly and indirectly. So high level, my view is, does it even matter, right? And a lot of founders are like, I don't want to have services, I don't want to have pro-serve, I don't want to do this because I've got to be in this narrow box. But Atlassian, and it's evolving, right? It's going to become more and more SaaS over time.
Sure.
But today, it's the whole kit and caboodle, right?
Sure. Well, I mean, the answer to that question again largely is answered by our kind of origin and when we started. So in 2002, we started kind of in a market where I think SaaS was a less common adoption pattern, certainly
Even
in
scary.
2002.
Scary.
Yeah, and so like we started shipping behind the firewall server software, and so like we're because we started there, we're really good at it. Like we know how to do it. We I think kind of read the tea leaves early enough, where we started a SaaS business now close to 10 years ago, and so our SaaS business on its own is a really big SaaS business, but I think we figured out, which is hard to do, how to thread both of those needles and not have it be a distraction or not have it be a weight that slows the company down.
Yeah.
It's a tricky thing to give people advice. Should I have started a SaaS business? Should I go behind the firewall? There could be some trade-offs there that I think every single company needs to think about carefully. And overall, the market, as most of us know in the room, is like moving towards cloud. And so I think you have to look at your individual
with flavors
market
of cloud,
segment.
private cloud and hybrid cloud.
Yeah.
And so it's getting simpler, and then it's getting more complicated as it gets simpler.
And it's been good for us. We've been able to kind of attack a wider segment of the market because we've figured out how to support both deployment choices. And again, like in removing friction, which is sort of like the mantra of the business, we simply present that to the customer as a free choice they can make on their own. And so if they've got an IT department and infrastructure and they're more comfortable installing and managing the server there, great. Let them knock themselves out. If they want us to do it and they want us to run it on our cloud platform, great. And we kind of don't care either way.
Yeah. One last question. I feel like I'm just getting going on the stuff I want to learn, but I want to. So whatever, Atlassian's blown through 100. It's blown through 300 million. I have this thesis of how far you can squint and see on the horizon. I think you can squint about 10x, and you can feel about 3x, right? And so, looking at $1 billion, which is a scary number, probably. How big was Atlassian when you joined in terms of revenue?
Like 20.
Okay, so $1 billion's a big journey from. So what's going to change at $1 billion? Do you have a sense? Does anything have to change? Outside of bringing in better talent, or what does the world look like out there at $1 billion in revenue?
Oh man,
You know?
if I had a crystal ball that told me all that,
Well, you know what it looks like next quarter.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say like, so absolutely there's going to be change. There's change, there's change for every company as it sort of crosses a bunch of big milestones. And so, there's going to be change around the size of the company and the number of Atlassians, that are working together. There's going to be change potentially like in markets that we kind of thrust into and like how our products need to evolve. I can't predict all of the changes nor tell you exactly what they will be, but yeah, there certainly will be some.
Well, let me ask you a final related question to it. In this whole journey of webification of everything, of SaaSification of everything, as Atlassian's gone from B2D to product to IT, in this whole thing, what inning do you think we're in of this journey? For everything to become webified and SaaSified, where are we? In the second inning, the fourth inning? How does it feel, having Atlassian been on this journey for a while?
Inning 1 or inning 2?
Inning 1 or inning 2?
Yeah, very, very, very early part of the game.
Very early,
for
right?
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a few down days in the market, no big deal, right?
No big deal.
All right, my friend, thank you very much. This was epic.
Thanks.
Yeah.